Babylon falls. Revelation chapter 17, 1 through 18. I'll do my best to work through this passage today. Title of the message, Babylon falls. Chapter 17, chapter 18 are actually one part of the book of Revelation that speak clearly about Babylon itself. And chronologically, chapter 16, which we looked at a couple weeks ago, it brings us up to the end of really human history, humanity, and it connects us to chapter 19, which is then the second coming of Christ, his setting up of his 1,000-year millennial reign and ruling in righteousness, and where Jesus, crushes what remains of this world's rebellion, and all things will be good for a time. And so, before we get to that, though, John is given greater insight into what is actually going to take place when the world system falls, and both religiously and politically. Are reminded in chapter 16, verse 19, when the seventh vial of God's wrath was poured out upon the earth, we read, "And great Babylon came in remembrance before God, to give her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath." So already in chapter 14 verse 8, chapter 16 verse 19, we've seen the fall of Babylon mentioned or discussed or proclaimed. And so now here in chapter 17 and 18, what you have is the details of that fall. He goes into greater detail of that fall. And I suppose I should take a few minutes in introduction just to speak about the development of that concept of Babylon. What it means in the Bible, what it's talking about when Babylon is in view. Because in the Old Testament, that phrase Babylon means many things. For instance, we know that Babylon was the center of human civilization after the flood. We read about that in Genesis chapter 11, where after the flood, mankind, all having the same language, remained for a time, came together in order to build a city and tower which would reach heaven. We call it the Tower of Babel. So there's this city of Babel, there's the empire of Babylon. And then it's also a nation of the southern kingdom, or that took the southern kingdom of Israel or Judah into captivity when Judah fell under the judgment of God, and so they became exiled in Babylon. You might find it interesting to know that Babylon is mentioned over 250 times in the Scriptures, honestly second only to the city of Jerusalem, the city of peace, which in all honesty, where historically there has been no peace, but one day that peace is coming. Yet those familiar with the Old Testament, you realize Babylon is more than a seat of human civilization. You realize it's more than just a place found near the Euphrates River after the flood. You realize it's more than a dominating world empire. It's more than a place where cruelly conquered Judah. Babylon biblically is associated specifically with just idolatry. It's associated with blasphemy. It's associated with rebellion. It's associated with everything that's against God. It's associated with persecution of God's people. And as much as anything, Babylon reflects and expresses what this world is all about. Anti-God. The fool has said in his heart, no to God. And that's the idea of Babylon. And the Bible warns us all about, over and over, the need to disconnect from this world and its values. Remember, John tells us directly, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. These verses draw a line. They're a barometer to see that you're in the faith. One of the commandments of Scripture, to prove yourself, see if you're in the faith. If your heart is after this world, it's a line that's drawn and tells you where you really stand before God. Love not the world, neither things that are in the world. If any man loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. 1 John 2:15 and 16. In every time and in every culture, there was what we might refer to as the spirit of the age. My son just used the word zeitgeist the other day, and I was like, wow, a big word. The spirit of the age. And that spirit seeks to lead us closer, not closer to God, but lead us farther from God. I mean, if you follow the ways of the world and the wants of this world and the desires of this world, the drives of this world, it will not lead you closer to the Lord, but further away from God. So even so, we could rightfully understand from a biblical perspective the common informal rebellion of mankind against God. You just see it. The spirit or essence of Babylon. The symbol, if you will, of Babylon in this world. We might go as far as to say, in simplistic or symbolic terms, that Jerusalem is a city of God's people and Babylon is a city of this world. So understand, this idea, when we're reading here about Babylon, is far more encompassing than just a city. It's far more encompassing just a system of belief. It's far greater than the kingdom of the Antichrist. The spirit of Babylon has roots that stem, really as far back as Genesis chapter 10 and chapter 11, even farther than that, as expressed in Cain's murder of Abel. That's the spirit of Babylon. Hate, murder against God. And that expression of Babylon was incredibly prominent in John's day, as exemplified in Rome. It was Rome that dominated kings. It was Rome that really drove the world culture, that antagonized and persecuted the people of God. And Babel is present today as expressed and exemplified in the world system. Today we might say that London or New York or even Hollywood are cities that drive the world's culture. It shapes the world views. It promotes idolatry. In my travels that take me to various countries, I see just the systems and the cultures of Hollywood in countries that should not even know about the place. You're in huts in Cambodia that have nothing, but they got a TV hooked up to a wire that goes up into a tree, and somehow through the static they can see the mindset of the American culture in Hollywood. And they think, and you come there, you walk those streets, and they think, that's what I am, because that's what they've seen on that TV. It's wild. It promotes these cities, it promotes idolatry. It promotes world values more than any other city on planet on this earth. But be that as it may, I'm making the personification of Babylon in ancient, it's as present as sin itself. The idea about Babylon being around us, it's been there since sin itself. So Babylon is expressed, we can say, in man's collective formal or informal rebellion against God, idolatry, persecution of God's people. And the Bible teaches that in the last days, prior to the return of Jesus Christ, that under the Antichrist, Babylon is going to hold this authority over all the earth like it never has before. That religious systems are going to be one, and there's going to be this political and commercial way that just is a hold over everything in this world. And chapter 17 details the downfall of Babylon, particularly in the religious system that's set up. Chapter 18 then details the downfall of Babylon concerning its commercial and political aspect. And so, of course, this morning, with a long introduction like that, we're only, of course, going to be able to get through chapter 17. So look to our text, verse 1 and 2. And it's very interesting to me that in Genesis chapter 2, Let's think about this. There you find Eve, this pure bride, in a lush garden. But now, by the time we reach the end of humanity, civilization's representation is reduced to a corrupted harlot in a barren land, just a barren wilderness. That's the net effect of sin in a world. See it? That's the effect of sin in a world. We spoke 2 weeks ago about the lure, the bait of sin, and what was sometimes seemed to be the logic of sin. People will logically, in their mind, go towards sin. Yet in the end times, in the end, that which we laid hold of, that we thought was actually going to improve or brighten our day, only winds up burning you. And here we see it again, how that sin reduces mankind in corruption and barrenness and really desensitizes man just like alcohol does to a drunkard. And so we read that one of the 7 angels who had poured out the final 7 vials or 7 bowls of God's wrath upon the earth, he came to John and he said to John, the destruction of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. You know, there are a number of different ideas that are asserted here. But first of all, we need to take really note of the fact that even before John sees the angel describe him, that the judgment of this great harlot is already affirmed. Even before the judgment starts, it's affirmed. The destruction of this religious system that deceives and desensitizes the masses is never in question. There's never a doubt regarding the ultimate fate and failing of Babylon. It is going to be judged to perdition. And why is Babylon referred to as a great whore or harlot? Well, it's because from God's perspective, the worship of anyone or anything other than Himself is spiritual adultery. I know that word, I have trouble even saying it from the pulpit. I know that word's offensive, but that's what you are when you worship or give allegiance or loyalty to anything or anyone other than God. Thus saith the Lord. And so, over and over again, throughout the Old Testament, you see Israel as being identified as God's bride, as God's betrothed. So whenever Israel would really cease in their worship of God and give allegiance to false gods or to worship idols, God considers that fornication. He considers it unfaithfulness to Himself. And so the true church coming forward, of whom the New Testament calls the bride of Christ, so it's depicted in the Scriptures as a pure virgin, innocent, clean, 2 Corinthians 11:2. And yet this false religious system, Babylon the Great, is depicted as a harlot who's abandoned the truth and really prostituted herself for personal gain, for global influence. And she sits on many waters, which we read there in the chapter represents people everywhere upon the earth. You see, it's not spiritual things that people are no longer interested in. This world is fascinated by spiritual things. That's why there's so many movies about the paranormal. That's why there are documentaries about ancient spiritual practices. It's why there are stores here on 3rd Street that sell crystals. It's why on 38 you can go by and there's a place that will read tarot cards or give readings. That's why there are thousands of denominations feeding people's spiritual hunger. People are interested in spiritual things. What people are no longer interested in is truth. You see, if I can gain some sense of worth and yet maintain my own desire of sin and lack of accountability through spiritual means, then I'm all in. If I can feel somewhat better about myself because I'm part of something that's outside of myself and I can keep living any way I want, then go for it. I can still sin, be justified in my own ungodly desires, and I can somehow gain this spiritual sense, this worth, as though I feel and I've contributed to the greater good of this world. So again, it's not spiritual things that people aren't interested in, it's the truth that they don't want. And what does the Bible say? 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1 and 2. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith. And they'll lay hold of exactly what I just described. Spirituality without belief. What appears to be righteous on the outside, ungodly on the inside. Giving heed to seducing spirits, doctrines of devils. Speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their conscience seared with a hot iron. 1 Timothy 4, 1 and 2. Maybe write this down. 2 Timothy 3, 1 through 5. 2 Peter 3 also speak to these very things. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1 through 5. 2 Peter chapter 3. And so we see clearly that this is taking place today. Within Bible commentators, as we sort of jump ahead, they're eager to pin this worldwide apostasy on the Roman Catholic Church. And certainly history points us to the fact, and even biblically we have reason to believe, that the Roman Catholic Church will undoubtedly play a major role in this final deception. But understand something this morning. The apostasy that we're reading about here in Revelation chapter 17 is much greater than one single denomination or religious institution can stir up. The kings of the earth commit fornication, it says, with her and enter into her proposal. There's this ungodly alliance of church and state. And we're told that the inhabitants of the earth are made to drink with the wine of her fornication. So this false religion will include faiths, all belief systems. It'll all be a mixed bag, a smorgasbord, all thrown into one pot. All these world religions coming together under the banner of unity. You think, preacher, we can't even get Baptist churches to work together. Let me share some things with you. I'm never going to get through this message. As far back as 1990, in our lifetime, Pope John Paul II, in addressing a prayer gathering of Christians, Muslims, Jews, and Buddhists, along with others, told participants that their efforts were unleashing profound spiritual energies in the world and bringing about a new climate of peace. Really? The Pope pledged that the Catholic Church intends to share in and promote such ecumenical and interreligious cooperation. The Catholic Review commented on this. That's one of their periodicals. Catholic Review commented on this and said, the unity of religion promoted by the Holy Father, Pope John Paul II, and approved by His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, is not a goal to be achieved immediately, but a day may come when the love and compassion which both Buddha and Christ preached so eloquently. Can you imagine putting Buddha and Christ on the same level in their preaching? The Buddha and Christ preached so eloquently will unite the world in a common effort to save humanity from senseless destruction and leading toward the light in which we all believe. In 1994, my first year of Bible college, going back, a document titled Evangelicals and Catholics Together, ECT, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that. Probably not. It wasn't really mainstream. It's just many times those in education that knew about it. It was signed by leading evangelical and Catholic scholars in the United States. And I'll let you look it up. Who signed ECT? And you'll see names on there. You'll go, no. They're immediately called to repent of signing that document. It was signed by leading evangelical and Catholic scholars in the United States. It sought to promote a common witness to the modern world and encourage day-to-day ecumenicism. And basically they're saying to downplay doctrine and to exalt where the few things that we do agree on. In June 2024, getting closer, more recent, a document titled, bear with me, these papers always have real long titles, The Bishop of Rome, Primacy and Synodality in Ecumenical Dialogue and Responses to the Encyclical Ut Unum Sent. I threw in a little Latin there to make it sound like they knew what they were talking about. Is the first Vatican text since the Second Vatican Council to outline the entire ecumenical debate on papal primacy. And it contains suggestions from Orthodox and Protestant Christian communities for how the role of the Bishop of Rome might look in the future reunited church. Okay? So, Orthodox and Protestant moving toward allegiance to the Pope, to be that one to lead us and guide us. You know, Karl Marx wasn't too far off when he said religion is the opiate of the masses. And more accurately, we say today that empty religion is a drug of the people. Empty religion is a drug of the people. People want a spiritual sense of self-worth. They just don't want the truth. That truth is that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and that no man cometh unto the Father but by Him. Verse 3 through 6. You got words like power, wealth, pollution, persecution. That summarizes this great harlot's involvement in this worldwide scale. She pollutes the nations with her filth and abomination that's pictured with her golden cup in her hand. She persecutes those who belong to the Lord. And then she sort of revels in, she rejoices in the blood of the saints, the martyrs of Jesus Christ. They're like the drunken vessels in her alcohol. That's her alcohol, just taking pleasure in the killing of those who truly follow God. It makes her high. Don't you think about that with those of the past that have been murderers in this world, of the Stalins, the Hitlers, and people like that, how they just became drunk or high with the power of death and killing in this world? Just multiply that on a scale you can't even understand. Persecution. It gives her a buzz. And John sees this. And it says, our Bible says it caused him wonder with great admiration. That he's not admiring what's taking place. He is shocked. It's like it's taken back. It blows his mind. John was accustomed to seeing pagans persecute Christians. But now you've got this self-proclaimed church, this religious institution masquerading as a representative of God, putting to death, shedding the blood of believers in Jesus Christ. That's why John is, what am I seeing? And so John gives a very vivid description of this false religious system in the last days. First, he tells us that she rides the scarlet beast that has 7 heads and 10 horns and is full of the names of blasphemy. We saw months ago, back in chapter 13, that beast is identified as the Antichrist. And that tells us this religious system, it will actually be supported by the Antichrist and even seem to have this dominating influence over him. It's like she's reigning with him, over him. And you know, it's kind of common. I think it's common, at least. Maybe you don't agree, but I think it's a common thing in the political world for politicians to use religious means to aid in accomplishing their personal agenda. Even to win elections. They'll say what they know their constituents want to hear. In the past, it was a moral majority. I was just a kid. But I remember my dad always listening to Falwell. The moral majority, and I remember him giving toward it. It helped to set the course for political things. We know how the Roman Catholic Church plays a huge part. There's no doubt that the Pope is the single most or largest religious influence in the world politics today. Virtually every leader of a country at some time in their office will go and have time speaking with the Pope, getting counsel from the Pope or whatever you might call it. Then you see the wealth of the religious systems. Again, you're ashamed. You just can't believe the wealth of the Roman Catholic Church, described as the purple and scarlet here in our scriptures. Not just fine and bright and white linen, but these are colors of the power of authority. The gold, the precious stones, the pearls. You see the wealth of Islam, really powered by Arab oil. The affluence of the Mormon Church with its $100 billion portfolio. The wealth seen in Hinduism. The extravagant temples. You don't even have to drive a half hour and you can see just the wealth. The woman herself, John tells in verse 18, is the great city which reigns, present tense, over the kings of the earth. That city that reigned over the kings of the earth at that time was none other than Rome. Powerful, prosperous, yet idolatrous and dangerous. Now I have to say this again, because we keep referencing the Roman Catholic Church throughout this chapter. This system is much larger than one religious institution. And nor does it honestly mean that every Roman Catholic is caught up in this deception. There are God-fearing people in the Catholic Church today. As they grow in the Scriptures, I believe they won't want to stay in it because they'll see the error that's being taught. But there are believers in the Catholic Church. Let me also tell you this, there are some radically deceived people in the Protestant churches today just as well. Believers will have been raptured out at this point. What's left in this time, you're going to see, is the residue of false religions. The deceived people, whether they be Catholic or Mormon, Hindu, Islam, Methodist, Lutherans, Baptists, whoever it might be, whatever they might be. And I'm merely suggesting that since the Antichrist will need a cult following from a pseudo-church, that it will appear as though the banner of the Roman Catholic Church may lead the charge. You've got to have someone to sort of lead the charge. And the things we've already read this morning almost shows you they're ready and willing. But no true believers will be part of this system. It talks about how deceptive it is, that even almost so that even the elect could be deceived, but it doesn't tell us that they are deceived. Just as it's almost possible that they could be deceived. No true believers will be part of that system. And so outwardly, it's going to look like it's faring sumptuously, as they say, that it's riches and a luxury. But truthfully, she's nothing more than a corrupt and unclean prostitute. And God makes that clear. And that's the difference between man's perspective and the reality of the truth as God exposes it. Verse 5. On her forehead a name is written. Here in ancient Rome, a common practice of the prostitutes that they would wear their name on a headband or identify themselves on their headband. And we see the true identification of this woman in verse 5. It says, mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. All false religions trace their origins in some way, their roots in some way, back to the shape and form in Babylon. Babylon gave birth to all these religious systems. And look at this, a mystery. It's a spiritual truth that cannot be known except God reveals it to us. That's what the mystery is about. The harlot, the great harlot, it says, culmination of ancient Babylonianism. She's been drunk in the past with the blood of the Old Testament saints. From John's day until the present, she is drunk with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus Christ. All the attacks of pagan religions have slaughtered millions, if not billions, throughout the years. And this carnage, this death will continue and doubtless increase even during the Great Tribulation. And Babylon is the seedbed of false religions. The mother, it says, of all harlots. Larger than one branch of any religious institution. The embodiment of Satan's own ecumenical movement. The world religion. And many of these deceived would be surprised. People that are caught up in this today and just almost like going in the flow, if they understood where their belief systems were taking them and their money was truly going to, they would be shocked that they're actually supporting what we're reading about here today. And verse 7 and 8 says, and very possibly we'll stop here, the Antichrist will stagger the minds of the unsaved. That is, those whose names were written in the book of life. And again, we see here that it's almost a tongue twister as you read it, but you see here that he was and he is not and will sin out of the bottomless pit, and his end will be perdition and destruction. That's exactly what we learn in Revelation chapter 11, verse 7, and chapter 13, verses 3 through 8. That same demonic entity that will possess the Antichrist had possessed the world ruler previously that John's writing about. And most believe, and I would concur, that it would be reference to Caesar Nero, who went on this satanic rampage after the Apostle Paul appeared before him. It's believed that Paul shared the gospel with Nero. Nero rejected the gospel. And because of that became demonically possessed and then persecuted Christians in unparalleled ways. You've read history about it. So this spirit of Antichrist is not, for a time, our time, but it will come out of the bottomless pit to possess the Antichrist and will lead those astray in this way, to reject the love and the truth, and they will be given into a lie. Just lay hold of the lie. And yet remember, ultimately, he will find his place in the lake of fire. It says there he will go to perdition. And that's part of the story. That's really part of the story. Next week's Father's Day, Lord willing, the week after, we'll try to finish it, of this chapter. But what the hope that we have to hang on to in hearing all this, reading about this, is when you read about verse 14, that these shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is the Lord of lords and the King of kings, and they that are with him are called the chosen and the faithful. You know, as I think about that, we know that this world's passing away. We know that the night cometh when no man can work. Hopefully you're one that loves the truth and not one that's going to be deceived and believe a lie. You know, when I read that, I fear and would ask you to consider which kingdom do you belong? Are you a citizen of the worldly city of Babylon? This wicked faith system, belief system? Or do you belong to the city of God, the New Jerusalem? The Bible tells us to make your calling and election sure. So these are things you must think about before you die. I've watched neighbors go to Mass daily, lighting candles and giving money for their loved ones that have already died, trying to help them get out of purgatory and into the presence of God. Deceived. Greatly deceived. So these are things we must decide before we leave this world. And the Bible tells us the world is passing away and the lust thereof, but he that does the will of the Lord will abide forever. And so, settle that today. Don't put it off. Christ came. He lived a sinless life. He fulfilled the law. He went to the cross. He paid the penalty of my sin, of your sin. He died, was buried 3 days. He rose again because the Father accepted the payment of our sin. And He lives. And He ascended back to the Father. And He sits at the right hand of the Father, where the Bible tells us that one day He will judge, which we're reading about right here. So He's your Savior if you'll let Him, if you'll make Him. And I can guarantee you He will be your judge one day. So, hard to understand? Yes. I trust that I've helped you a little bit this morning. Honestly, it's going to get more difficult in the latter part of the text. Okay? But it brings us to understand that this is all of God. It's a result of sin, but this is God. God is working us out in the world as He does everything. And so we have to submit to Him. We have to yield to Him. Let's pray. Lord, I